Some women only look graceful because they have already survived the worst kind of disrespect. Camille Brooks heard the laugh before she saw the woman wearing it. It floated across the marble lobby of the Langford Hotel, light and sharp, the kind of laugh meant to make other people turn their heads. Camille kept walking. Her black dress brushed softly against her knees, simple but clean, the kind of dress she had bought herself after the divorce because no one could take it from her. No diamonds. No borrowed shine. Just her, standing straight beneath a ceiling full of chandeliers that made everyone else look richer than they felt. Tonight's charity gala was supposed to belong to Preston Whitaker. His company logo was printed on the step-in repeat outside. His name was in the program. His smile was on every sponsor banner in the room. And there he was, near the grand staircase, tall, polished, and painfully familiar in a dark tuxedo, one hand tucked in his pocket like the whole night had been arranged for his comfort. On his arm stood Sloane Mercer, blonde, glittering, and smiling like a woman who had mistaken another woman's pain for her own victory. Camille's fingers tightened around the small silver clutch in her hand. Not enough for anyone to notice. Just enough for her to feel the edge press into her palm and remind herself to breathe. She had promised herself she would not give them a scene. Not tonight. Not after everything. Preston saw her first. His smile paused for half a second, then returned colder. "Camille," he said, walking toward her like he was greeting an old employee instead of the woman who had once stayed up until 2 in the morning helping him rewrite speeches he could never finish alone. "I did not think you would come." Camille looked at him, then at the crowded ballroom behind him. "I was invited." Sloane stepped closer before Preston could answer. Her perfume arrived first, sweet and expensive, filling the small space between them. "That was brave," Sloane said, tilting her head. "Most women would have stayed home after everything. But I guess some people need closure in public." A few guests nearby went quiet. Camille felt it. The shift. The little hunger people get when they think humiliation is about to become entertainment. Preston did not stop her. He did not even look embarrassed. He simply adjusted his cuff link and glanced toward a photographer as if Camille's dignity was an inconvenience he had not scheduled for. Something in Camille's chest ached, but it did not break. It had broken before. In quieter rooms. In lawyers' offices. In the home where Preston had once told her she was too emotional to stand beside him in public. "Enjoy your evening, Sloane," Camille said softly. Sloane blinked, almost disappointed. "That's it." Camille gave her a small, tired smile. "That's all you earned." For one clean second, the room forgot how to whisper. Then Preston leaned in, his voice low. "Do not make this awkward." Camille looked at the man who had turned silence into a weapon and called it class. "I'm not the one making it awkward." She walked past them before her hands could shake harder. Behind her, Sloane gave a small laugh, but it sounded thinner now. Camille crossed into the ballroom. Every step measured, every breath pulled slowly through the knot in her throat. Gold lights spilled over white tablecloths. Champagne glasses chimed. Men who used to ignore her suddenly studied her face like they were trying to remember what she knew. She knew plenty. She knew where the money had gone. She knew which names had been hidden from donor reports. And she knew Preston still believed she had come as the abandoned wife, hoping to be seen. But Camille had not come to beg for a seat at his table. She had come because, 3 hours earlier, the Gala board had sent her a private message with 6 words that changed the meaning of the entire night. "The board is ready for you." Camille did not look back right away. That was the first thing Sloane failed to understand. A woman who still wanted approval would have turned around, would have defended herself, would have tried to prove she belonged in that room. Camille kept walking because she had already learned the cost of explaining herself to people committed to misunderstanding her. She stopped near a tall cocktail table beside the east windows, where the city lights of Chicago shimmered against the glass. Her reflection stared back at her, calm on the outside, eyes a little too tired underneath. She placed her silver clutch on the table, set both hands flat beside it, and let herself breathe once. Just once. "You handled that better than I would have," a woman beside her murmured. Camille glanced over and recognized Denise Albright, one of the Gala committee members, older, elegant, and watching the room with the sharp patience of someone who missed nothing. Camille gave a quiet smile. "I have had practice." Denise's face softened, but before she could answer, Sloane's voice cut through the air again, closer this time. "Practice at walking away, maybe." Camille turned slowly. Sloane had followed her across the ballroom, Preston a few steps behind, wearing that careful expression he used whenever he wanted cruelty to look like sophistication. Several guests nearby pretended to study the floral arrangements, but their ears leaned in before their bodies did. Sloane lifted a champagne glass she had barely touched. "I just think it is impressive," she said, smiling wide enough for witnesses. "Some women lose the marriage, lose the house, lose the life, and still show up like they were invited to the main table." Camille felt her throat tighten, not because the words surprised her, but because Preston let them land. Again, his silence stood beside Sloane like a second date. Camille looked at him, waiting for even 1 inch of decency. He only said, "Sloane, let us not make a scene. Not stop. Not apologize. Just do not make a scene." As if the problem was volume, not cruelty. Sloane laughed under her breath. "I am not making a scene. I am being honest." Then she turned back to Camille. "Some women know when to leave. Others need to be embarrassed into it." The words felt clean and ugly. A few people looked down. One man coughed into his napkin. Camille's hand moved toward her clutch, and for half a second, her fingers trembled. Inside that clutch was her phone, screen dark, recording everything from the moment Sloane had followed her. Not because Camille planned to trap anyone, because after the divorce, she had stopped trusting rooms where powerful people smiled too much. Preston leaned closer, his voice low enough to sound private, but sharp enough to cut. "Camille, this is not the place." She looked at him then, really looked. At the smooth hair, the expensive watch, the man who could charm a boardroom in 30 seconds, but could not find 3 honest words for the woman he had once promised to protect. "You are right," she said softly. "This is not the place for lies." Sloane's smile flickered. "Excuse me." Camille picked up her clutch and held it gently, like it carried nothing heavier than lipstick and keys. "Enjoy the gala." Then she walked away, leaving them with the silence they had always mistaken for weakness. Behind her, Preston whispered something tense to Sloane. Camille did not need to hear it. Her phone had already heard enough. Preston had always known how to leave a woman standing alone without ever moving his feet. That was what made it hurt so quietly. Camille stood near the edge of the ballroom, half hidden by a column wrapped in white orchids, and watched him guide Sloane back toward the center of the room as if nothing had happened. He leaned down, murmured something near Sloane's ear, and she smiled again, bright and satisfied, like a child who had been told she was still the favorite. Camille looked away before the ache in her chest could turn visible. She had not expected Preston to defend her. Not really. But some small, stubborn piece of her had wondered whether shame might still live somewhere inside him. It did not. He saw her humiliation as a public relations problem, not a human one. That had always been his gift, turning pain into optics. A server passed with a tray of sparkling water, and Camille took one glass just to have something to hold. The bubbles rose fast, then disappeared. She understood the feeling. Denise Albright came up beside her again, lowering her voice. "Are you all right?" Camille gave the kind of smile women give when the honest answer would take too long. "I will be." Denise studied her for a second. "That woman followed you because she wanted a reaction." "I know." And Preston allowed it. Camille looked across the room. Preston was laughing with 2 donors now, one hand resting lightly on Sloane's back. He has always been generous with other people's dignity. Denise's mouth tightened, but she did not push. Camille appreciated that. Pity had weight, and she was tired of carrying it. Across the ballroom, Preston glanced over and caught Camille watching. For a moment, his expression sharpened. Not guilt, not regret, calculation. Then his phone buzzed in his hand. He looked down, frowned, and stepped away from the donors. Camille saw it happen in real time, the first tiny crack in his perfect evening. His shoulders stiffened. His jaw shifted. Sloane touched his arm, asking what was wrong, but he shook his head and walked toward the hallway near the coat check. Camille's own phone vibrated inside her clutch. She opened it beneath the table linen, careful and quiet. A message from Denise's assistant lit the screen. "The board is assembled in the private room. 10 minutes. Camille stared at the words until they blurred. Her thumb hovered above the screen. 10 minutes. That was all that stood between the woman Preston thought he had buried and the truth he had spent 2 years polishing into a lie. Her stomach tightened, not from fear exactly, but from the memory of every time she had swallowed the truth to keep his world from cracking. The missed dinners. The whispered insults. The way he introduced her as my wife in public and treated her like staff in private. The night after the divorce hearing, when he had told her, "You should be grateful I did not make this worse." Camille had believed him then. That was the part that still embarrassed her. She had believed a man could take almost everything and still call it mercy. Preston returned from the hallway with his face arranged again, but it was not as smooth as before. He looked around the room, searching. When he found Camille, his eyes narrowed. He started toward her. Camille slipped her phone back into her clutch and lifted her chin. "Camille," he said when he reached her, voice low and tight. "Whatever you think you are doing tonight, do not embarrass yourself." She looked at him for a long second. This was the same voice he had used in court, in their kitchen, in every room where he needed her smaller than him. Her hand wanted to shake, so she pressed it against the cool glass in front of her. "I am not here to embarrass myself, Preston." His eyes dropped to her clutch, then back to her face. "Then why are you here?" Camille looked past him toward the closed private room doors, where the board was waiting. "Because somebody finally asked me the right questions." Preston's question stayed in the air long after he walked away, but Camille did not chase it. She had spent too many years answering him too quickly, softening her voice, explaining her reasons, trying to make the truth sound gentle enough for his ego to survive it. Not anymore. She watched him return to Sloane, watched her slide her hand through his arm like she was claiming property, and for a second Camille saw the past so clearly it almost stole the breath from her. There had been a time when Preston could not walk into a room like this without her. Not because he admitted it, but because she built the room before he entered it. She remembered sitting at their kitchen island in their old Lincoln Park condo, surrounded by donor lists, coffee gone cold, and sticky notes stuck to her laptop. Preston would pace behind her, rehearsing lines he pretended he had written himself. "Make it sound warmer," he would say, but not desperate. "Important, but humble." Camille would look up at him, tired from her own full-time job, and still fix every sentence. She knew which donors cared about children's clinics, which ones wanted scholarships, which ones only came if a photographer was present. She knew how to turn Preston's ambition into compassion on paper. And people believed it. They believed him. The Gala grew year after year, and so did his reputation. Newspapers called him generous. Business magazines called him civic-minded. Preston called it strategy. Camille called it work. Quiet work. Invisible work. The kind women are expected to do with a smile, then disappear from when the cameras turn on. At first, she did not mind. She loved him then. That was the truth she rarely said out loud because it made the betrayal feel even more humiliating. She had loved the man he almost was, the man who held her hand under banquet tables before power taught him to let go. Then Sloane arrived as a branding consultant with glossy folders, bright ideas, and a habit of laughing at Preston's jokes before he finished them. Camille noticed the change slowly. Preston stopped asking for her opinion and started calling her sensitive when she gave it. He told her black dresses were too severe, her natural hair was too bold for certain donor dinners. Her questions made people uncomfortable. "You do not have to be in every room, Camille," he said one night, barely looking up from his phone. "Some rooms require a lighter touch." She understood what he meant. She wished she had not. After the divorce, Preston took the condo, the contacts, the public story. Camille took 2 boxes of clothes, her mother's framed photograph, and a hard drive full of records nobody had bothered to ask about. Receipts, draft emails, donor agreements, internal notes with Preston's edits written right in the margins. He had thought she was too hurt to notice, too proud to speak, too replaceable to matter. Now, standing under the warm lights of the Langford Hotel, Camille looked toward the private room doors and felt her pulse steady. Denise appeared beside her and touched her elbow lightly. "They are ready." Camille nodded. Across the ballroom, Preston saw them move. His smile dropped. Sloane looked from Camille to Denise, suddenly unsure why the woman she had tried to embarrass was being led behind the doors reserved for board members only. Camille did not rush. She walked with the calm of a woman who had carried the truth long enough to stop being afraid of its weight. And as the door opened for her, Preston finally realized there were parts of his empire that still had her fingerprints all over them. The private room behind the ballroom felt nothing like the gala outside. No music, no crystal glasses, no rehearsed smiles. Just a long walnut table, 12 board members, 2 attorneys, and a projector screen glowing pale blue against the far wall. Camille stepped in with Denise beside her, and every conversation stopped. Not in shock. In respect. That was the first thing that almost undid her. Respect felt strange after being treated like an old mistake for so long. At the head of the table, Margaret Bellamy, the board chair, stood and held out her hand. "Mrs. Brooks, thank you for coming." Camille shook it. "Camille is fine." Margaret nodded, her face serious but kind. "Then thank you, Camille." One of the attorneys, a quiet man with silver glasses, opened a folder thick with printed emails. "We have reviewed the documents you provided. Donor allocations, restricted grants, internal revisions, and the communication records connected to Mr. Whitaker's office." Camille sat down slowly. Her knees felt steady now, but her chest was tight. Hearing it said out loud made the last 2 years feel less like grief and more like evidence. "I did not send them to hurt him," she said. "I sent them because people gave money believing it would reach clinics, scholarships, and housing programs. Some of it did. Some of it became press events with prettier names." A woman near the end of the table closed her eyes like that confirmed something she had feared. Denise placed Camille's phone on the table. "There is also new audio from tonight." Camille glanced at the silver clutch in her lap. The small recording had not been the whole truth, but it showed the room what Preston still thought he could get away with. The attorney connected the phone. Sloane's voice filled the private room, bright and cruel. "Some women know when to leave. Others need to be embarrassed into it." No one spoke for a moment. Camille looked at the table instead of their faces. She was not ashamed, but shame had a way of showing up even when it did not belong to you. Margaret's voice was low when she said, "And Mr. Whitaker stood there?" Camille nodded once. He always knew when to be quiet. Outside, the ballroom applause rose faintly through the walls. The program was moving forward. Preston was probably straightening his jacket, preparing for the announcement he thought belonged to him. Margaret looked at the attorneys. "Then we proceed." 10 minutes later, Camille returned to the ballroom through a side entrance. The lights had dimmed. The master of ceremonies stood on stage with a cream envelope in his hand, smiling toward Preston's table. Sloane had one hand on Preston's sleeve, already posing for the moment. Camille stood near the back, almost invisible. Almost. The master of ceremonies opened the envelope, then paused. His smile faltered as Denise stepped up beside him and handed him a second card. A quiet ripple moved through the room. Preston leaned forward. Sloane's hand slipped from his arm. The man at the microphone cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, there has been an update to tonight's recognition." Camille felt every eye begin to search for the reason. Preston found her first. His face changed before the name was even said. "This year's leading recovery sponsor and incoming advisory chair is Camille Brooks." For one stunned second, the room went silent. Then the applause began, uncertain at first, then louder, warmer, rising like something that had been waiting too long to be released. Camille stepped forward, not as the woman Preston had discarded, not as the target of Sloane's little performance, but as the one person in the room who had carried the truth without letting it make her cruel. Preston's mouth parted slightly. Sloane looked as if the floor had moved beneath her. Camille passed their table without slowing down. She did not look at them. She did not need to. The spotlight had finally found the woman they had tried to keep in the dark. Camille reached the stage with her hands steady, but only because she held them together in front of her. The applause washed over her in waves, and for a moment she had to remind herself that she was not back in that courtroom, not standing beside Preston while his attorney described her like a financial mistake. She was here, under warm lights, in front of people who were finally saying her name without pity. The master of ceremonies stepped aside and offered her the microphone. "Camille Brooks, everyone." The applause grew again. Camille looked out over the ballroom and saw the faces clearly now. Donors, executives, reporters, women in evening gowns who had once smiled through her. Men who had shaken Preston's hand while ignoring the woman who wrote half his speeches. And there, near the front, Preston sat frozen with his jaw tight and his eyes fixed on her like he was watching a door close from the wrong side. Sloane leaned toward him, whispering fast, but he did not answer. Camille took one breath. "Thank you," she said. Her voice came out quiet, but the room listened. "I know some of you are surprised to see me up here tonight." A soft laugh moved through the crowd, nervous but human. Camille smiled slightly. "That is all right. I was surprised too, The first time I realized how much work can be done in silence and still be forgotten in public. The room went still. Not cold. Attentive. She continued. For years, I believed grace meant staying quiet when people were unfair. I thought it meant keeping peace, protecting reputations, smoothing over rooms that were never built to protect me back. Her eyes drifted briefly toward Preston, then moved on. She would not give him the gift of being the center. But I learned something the hard way. Grace is not pretending nothing hurt you. Grace is refusing to become cruel just because someone else was. A woman near the middle table lifted her hand to her chest. Denise stood by the stage stairs, watching with wet eyes and a proud little nod. Camille's throat tightened, but she kept going. This gala was created to fund real help. Clinics, housing support, scholarships, programs that do not care what your last name is, only whether you need a door opened. She paused, letting the words settle. That mission is bigger than any one man's image. It is bigger than press photos. It is bigger than polished speeches. And it is bigger than the fear that keeps good people from asking hard questions. Preston shifted in his chair. Camille saw it. So did half the room. The screen behind her changed from the Gala logo to a clean white slide with 3 words at the top, Emergency Ethics Review. A ripple moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "What is that?" Sloane's smile vanished completely. Preston stood halfway, then sat back down when Margaret Bellamy appeared near the side of the stage with both attorneys. Camille turned slightly, saw the slide, and faced the room again. Tonight is not about punishment, she said. It is about accountability. It is about making sure generosity does not become a costume powerful people wear when cameras are nearby. The applause this time did not come all at once. It started at one table, then another. Then chairs shifted as people stood. Camille looked out and saw the impossible happening. The room that had been waiting for her to break was now standing for her. And in the front row, Preston Whitaker finally understood that the woman he had treated like a footnote had just become the headline. The standing applause did not last forever, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the applause itself. Camille lowered the microphone slightly as Margaret Bellamy stepped forward with the 2 attorneys beside her. The screen behind them shifted again, clean and simple, no drama, no music, just the kind of plain truth people cannot easily talk their way around. Restricted donor funds. Unauthorized reallocation. Personal branding expenses. The words appeared one by one, and each one seemed to drain more color from Preston's face. A low murmur spread through the ballroom. Camille could feel people looking from the screen to Preston, then back again, trying to measure the man they thought they knew against the paper trail now hanging above him. Margaret took the microphone from its stand. The board has opened an emergency ethics review into the handling of several donor accounts connected to Whitaker Civic Partners, she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse for him. Pending the review, Mr. Preston Whitaker will be removed from all speaking, signing, and advisory duties connected to this foundation. Sloane stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. This is ridiculous, she snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. You cannot just humiliate him in front of donors. Camille looked at her then, not with anger, with something quieter, and that seemed to unsettle Sloane even more. One of the attorneys leaned toward the microphone. Miss Mercer, some of the marketing invoices under review were approved through your consulting office. The room turned toward Sloane like a tide. Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, the woman who loved an audience had nothing ready for it. Preston stood, buttoning his jacket with hands that were not as steady as he wanted them to look. There has been a misunderstanding, he said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. I am happy to answer questions, but this is not the appropriate forum. A reporter near the aisle lifted a phone. Mr. Whitaker, did restricted clinic funds pay for the national media package attached to your leadership profile? Preston's smile cracked. I said I will answer questions at the proper time. Margaret nodded to the technician at the back of the room. The screen changed again. This time, it showed email excerpts, invoice numbers, donor restrictions, and Preston's own typed responses approving language changes that moved expenses from outreach to image development. Not one accusation needed to shout. The documents spoke in a flat, deadly voice. Camille stood slightly to the side, no longer gripping the microphone. Her body felt strange, light, and heavy at the same time. Part of her wanted to disappear, because old habits do not leave quietly. Another part of her stood still, remembering every night she had begged Preston not to blur the lines. Every time he had laughed and said, "You worry too much." Sloane turned on him in a whisper that still carried. "You told me this was clean." Preston shot her a look sharp with panic. "Not now." Camille heard it and almost felt sorry for the woman. Almost. Denise stepped beside Camille and handed her the silver clutch. "You did the right thing," she said softly. Camille looked down at it, at the phone inside, at the tiny object that had held one more piece of truth. Then she looked back at Preston. He was surrounded now, not by enemies, but by questions. That was what frightened him most. Not outrage. Questions. Because questions opened doors he had spent years locking. As security quietly guided him away from the stage area, Preston's eyes found Camille's. For a second, the whole ballroom seemed to fall away. He looked wounded, betrayed, almost offended that she had not protected him from the consequences of his own choices. Camille did not look away. Her silence had protected him for years. Tonight, it finally protected her. Preston did not wait for the board to finish. Men like him rarely feared the truth until it started moving without their permission. He slipped through the side exit near the service hallway, away from the cameras, away from the donors, away from the room that had stopped bending toward him. Camille saw him go, but she did not follow. She was speaking quietly with Margaret when Denise touched her arm and looked toward the hallway. "He is asking for you." Camille almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. Of course he was. Preston had ignored her when she asked to be heard, but now that his world was cracking, he suddenly needed a private conversation. "You do not have to," Denise said. Camille looked across the ballroom. Sloane stood near the bar with her phone pressed to her ear, her face pale under all that perfect makeup. Reporters hovered close enough to hear anything useful. Preston's table was half empty now. The people who had laughed with him an hour ago were pretending they had only known him casually. Camille set her water glass down. "I know." The hallway outside the ballroom was quieter, lined with framed black and white photos of old Chicago galas. Preston stood near a window overlooking Michigan Avenue, his tuxedo still sharp, his expression not. When he turned, Camille saw anger first, then fear, then something that wanted to look like hurt. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" he said. No greeting, no apology, just accusation, like he had been the one dragged through the room in front of strangers. Camille stopped several feet away. "I told the truth." "No," he snapped, then lowered his voice when a waiter passed at the end of the hall. "You staged a public execution." Camille's eyes stayed on his face. "That is dramatic, even for you. Do not do that." He stepped closer, but she did not move back. "Do not stand there acting above it. You wanted this. You wanted them to look at me like that." Camille felt the old instinct rise inside her, the urge to soften the moment, to calm him down, to make his anger less dangerous to the room. She let the instinct pass. "I wanted the foundation protected." Preston laughed once, bitter and thin. "Please. You have been waiting to punish me since the divorce." The word landed between them. Divorce. Such a clean little word for what had been months of erasure. Camille remembered the empty condo, the folded papers, the way he had walked out of court smiling like he had negotiated a merger. She remembered him saying she would thank him one day for being reasonable. Her throat tightened, but her voice did not. "You think everything is about you because that is the only way you know how to survive your own choices." Preston stared at her. For the first time all night, he had no polished answer ready. "I gave you a life," he said finally. Camille nodded slowly. "You gave me rooms where I had to shrink to fit." His jaw worked. Was this revenge? There it was. The question he needed, because revenge would make her small enough for him to understand. Revenge would let him call her bitter, angry, unstable, the ex-wife who could not move on. Camille looked at the man she once loved, and the sadness came then, quiet and honest. Not because she wanted him back, because she had once wanted him to be better. "No, Preston," she said. "Revenge would mean I still cared enough to ruin you." His face changed. She took one step closer, not to comfort him, not to threaten him, but to make sure he heard every word. This is just the truth catching up. Behind them, the ballroom doors opened, and applause spilled into the hallway like warm air. Margaret's voice came through the microphone, announcing Camille's new advisory role. Preston looked toward the sound, then back at her, and for a second she saw it hit him. The room was not waiting for him anymore. It was waiting for her. Camille did not answer the applause right away. She stood in the hallway with Preston behind her and the ballroom ahead of her, caught between the life that had tried to shrink her and the one waiting for her to step into it. For years, she had believed closure would feel loud, like a door slammed, a speech delivered, a room gasping at the truth. But standing there, she realized closure was much quieter. It was the moment she stopped needing Preston to understand the damage he had done. She walked back into the ballroom, and people turned toward her with a respect that no longer felt borrowed. Margaret Bellamy handed her the microphone again. "Camille, we would be honored if you accepted the advisory chair position." Camille looked out at the crowd, then at Denise, who gave her a small nod. Her hand tightened once around the microphone. "I accept," she said. The applause rose, warm and steady, but Camille's eyes drifted to the exit where Preston stood half-hidden in shadow. He was not ruined by her. He was standing inside the life he had built with shortcuts, silence, and pride. Sloane had disappeared toward the elevators, chased not by cruelty, but by questions she could no longer charm her way around. Camille felt no joy in their humiliation. That surprised her. For so long, she thought healing would come when they finally felt small. But healing came when their size no longer mattered to her. Later, after the donors returned to their conversations and reporters packed up their cameras, Camille stepped outside into the cool Chicago night. A light rain had started, soft enough to blur the streetlights along Michigan Avenue. Denise followed her out and stood beside her under the hotel awning. "Are you okay?" Camille smiled, tired but real. "I think I am getting there." Denise nodded. "You were remarkable tonight." Camille looked down at her simple black dress, now dotted with rain. "I was scared." "I know," Denise said. "That is what made it brave." Across the driveway, Preston stood alone near the curb, phone in hand. No cameras, no crowd, no one rushing to open a door for him. For a second, Camille remembered the man he had almost been. Then she let the memory pass. He looked at her like he wanted to say something. Maybe apologize, maybe ask for mercy, maybe blame her one last time. Camille did not wait to find out. A black car pulled up, and Denise opened the door for her. Before getting in, Camille turned back toward the hotel, toward the chandeliers, the whispers, the room where she had finally stopped disappearing. She did not leave with Preston's regret. She did not leave with Sloane's defeat. She left with her name intact. And sometimes that is the deepest kind of victory. Not making them suffer. Not making them beg. Just becoming so whole that the people who once broke your heart can no longer decide what it is worth.